Okay. Well, it's wonderful to see so many familiar and even more so many unfamiliar names and faces here. Thank you all so much for coming. This is the inauguration webinar of the webinar series of the MULTIDATA project, which is funded by a grant from the Erasmus Plus KA 220 for cooperation in higher education. We are recording Mark's talk today, so you have officially been warned. Just before we introduce Mark, very quickly, the MULTIDATA project is really a platform that the universities of Radboud, Nijmegen, FAU, Erlangen-Nuremberg, and Murcia thought it could be useful to get online and to have there for the international community to share, the international community interested in the study of multimodal communication, especially using new technologies and new computational tools. So what we mainly decided to do was we were groups of people who were studying multimodal communication using various tools ranging from computer vision to automatic speech recognition to natural language processing and so forth. We thought that many of these tools could be handy for a wider audience to have easier access to, and so that they didn't have mainly to go through everything we have gone through to attain some mastery and to make them work for our data sets. So we tried to facilitate that by putting some of them online and creating a pipeline. And then we thought that any excuse is a very good excuse for hanging out with like-minded professionals. So we thought that we could include a forum, tutorials, some video guidelines, and events both online and some on-site events in various places as well. So we're going to have a series of webinars that is inaugurated today, and we'll bring experts on multimodal data science in the application of tools to the study of computational tools to the study of multimodal data science, and also to their application in teaching and learning, mainly in higher education, and how can we make the most of these tools. And then we're going to have some on-site events at conferences. We would love to see many of you in July out at our workshop, co-located event with the conference of the International Society for Gesture Studies, and others that we will be announcing over the next few months. We will also have a newsletter, and we'll invite you to come to the website and check it out, try the pipeline, and subscribe to the newsletter. There will be a link there to do so. So far, we are just some guys and getting this started. So we didn't have the time to make this a service. The project has really officially been working since January, but we had a few administrative situations that had caused some delays. So we're practically starting now. And we invite you all to register, telling us who you are, because we are not ready for, you know, a big anonymous service at the moment, but we will also get there. So for the series of webinars, well, some of us should be thanking Mark Turner all their lives. So when I present him, since he doesn't need a lot of presentation or introduction, I'm going to thank him once more. Mark is the originator of blending theory and one of the leading researchers in cognitive science and cognitive linguistics, also in areas like construction grammar. And a few years ago, quite a few now, time flies, he decided to put together this international consortium, whatever you call it. It's a wonderful thing called the Red Hen Lab, where people from different places around the world get together to develop big data sets and tools for the study of multimodal communication. And some of us were there at the beginning. We didn't know what he was talking about, but we just were faithful that he was pointing in the right direction and went on. And now we're very grateful because we learned a lot over the years with all the various research and activities that we have been doing. So Mark is going, I think, to point us again in some interesting directions. I'm going to give the floor to him right away. He will organize this as he pleases, which is what he always does. And he will, but he knows that these are interactive webinars that are meant for people to ask questions and to get engaged with the speaker. Of course, we have a lot of people here, so we will have to get that a little bit organized. But do not hesitate to raise your hands or give us your questions through the chat, and we will do the best we can. Thank you again. Many thanks to Mark for being here for us.
Thank you, Cristobal. Thanks for all the gratitude for the past. I've learned more from you than you have from me. But of course, we're here about the future, right? Forget the past, or it's water under the bridge. Look through the windshield, not in the rear view mirror. And I'm looking at the future here. It's all of you, so many people. Hello, Osley. So I started this long time ago, and I was just doing the normal thing that human beings have always done. You're amazed by human performance, and you look at it and you say something about it. Wow, look at that kid, what that kid can do. And they've been doing this, by they, I mean human beings, for as long as we know. And they've been writing about it. They look at something and they have a thought and they say it. And this is the basis of art history. You look at a painting, there's Michelangelo's Doni Tondo, and you have things to say about it, and you gather wisdom and you say stuff. And you look at the opening of Homer and sing to me muse, and you say, wow, that's just really amazing. Look at this, and you say stuff in literary criticism. And mostly that was how the science of multimodal communication went. But I was also doing other things where there was big data, you know, economics and decision theory and physics, astrophysics. And I was also, beginning in 1970, working in Unix systems and computer science and early AI in Stanford. And I had a yearning for data. And I found in linguistics a great source of data, and that was Indo-Europeanists, people who looked at language change, diachronic linguistics. They actually had to look at data because the people they wanted to study weren't alive anymore. And in particular, I ran across this in looking at Germanic languages and Old English, where the real desire was to get as much data as you could to make models of the data, really to make predictions. So really textual and bibliographic criticism of ancient texts and diachronic linguistics provided an inspiration. And there were always problems with the data, different interpretations, things like a hapax legomenon, where here's a word and it's the only time this word occurs in the whole data. So what the heck can we do? And this established certain standards. So when I was doing my dissertation, I spent about 6 months trying to get data. Data on what? Data on the XYZ construction. X is the Y of Z. Paul is the father of Mary. Causation is the cement of the universe. Necessity is the mother of invention. And death is the mother of beauty, right? So I got them from everywhere. I got them from books. I looked in concordances. And I had been inspired by the Oxford English Dictionary because that was a dictionary based on history. They would actually give you data about the history of the use of a word. I used to have note cards and I would write things down that people said. And people thought I was so interested in the content of what they were saying. In fact, I was just interested in the construction they were using. X is the Y of Z. So about every 5 years, my first book was Death is the Mother of Beauty. And about every 5 years, I write something else on the XYZ construction. It's custom built for blending. I didn't have that term at the time, but XYZ constructions take up about 2 chapters in the way we think on blending. Now, this was kind of hilarious. I spent 6 months putting together enough data before I thought that I could actually start to analyze. And that amount of data is nothing. It's trivial compared to what I could get now in 10 seconds. It's nothing. Everything is moved. And I'm delighted to see this because I hoped to bring to the study of multimodal communication big data, prediction, hypothesis. And this meant we had to move away from the beautiful and impressive performance of critics who'd spent a lifetime looking at multimodal communication and who would speak their wisdom. And sometimes it was quite moving, sometimes you were inspired, but it wasn't really based on data. Now, there was a substitute, and this is my training. We're going back to 1970 now. Where did you get data? Well, the answer is you just asked yourself. You're a speaker of English, right? How do I use the word anathema? Well, I use the word anathema, and I'm a native speaker of English, right? Isn't anything I generate data? And, if I want to know if that's grammatical, why don't I just ask myself? I'm a native speaker of English. Well, the terrors and demerits of introspection are well known. Linguists are much worse at grammaticality judgments than the average run of people. It's deeply biased. And so in my undergraduate youth, I would spend time in talks watching linguists argue about whether or not something was grammatical. This could go on for 20 minutes, and they would be, brilliant people. Their head could be exploding. And they would say, I have a really strong intuition that this is not grammatical. And I understand that as I'm an old guy. So I, for example, can't say this window needs washed. That's a Western Pennsylvania dialect. I can't say my idea is based off a paper by Peter Ehring. For me, it can't be based off. It has to be based on. I can't say that Amazon is based out of Seattle. So I have these normative ears just like anybody else. But that's just the point. These things are grammatical now. They evolve. And the human being is ontogenetic. And these sorts of judgments just tell you something about that person's experience. So I was very disappointed with the STAR method of grammaticality judgments and had always been looking for ways to get data. Fast forward, I encountered Francis Steen, who I had been on his dissertation committee when he was at the University of California, Santa Barbara. He's now a professor at UCLA. And I was spending 2008, 2009 down in San Diego, going to Cognitive Science Department on a grant. We went up to see him, largely because my wife had to go pick up a prize at UCLA. And we took our kids. And one of our kids, who was in high school, had a long and complicated discussion with Francis Steen about quantum physics. But Francis wanted to show us his new effort, and that was recordings of television. This had started a long time ago during Watergate because people wanted to look at the history of politics. And guess what? There's news. And under Section 108 of the US Copyright Act, you all should be jealous in Brazil and Europe and China. We are allowed to record news, including soft news. So that's basically anything where people are talking about current events. And to store it and loan it to researchers for the purpose of research. Well, it had happened that they had been recording news in the Department of Journalism of Communication at UCLA. And it was all analog. It was on videotapes at first. But they were starting to digitize it, and Francis Steen had picked this up. Well, I was astonished because here was all this data, right? So we started talking immediately, and these, luckily the news and many other things aside come with closed captions, which means it's in the digital recording, right? So we worked on, can you separate out the closed captions? Because that's text. And I'm an old Unix guy, so if we had the text, we could use all the standard Unix calls, grep, awk, sed, whatever, to search through the data automatically using a computer. And if we timestamped all of this, and luckily it was timestamped, you could go to exactly where that text occurred and see the human being actually perform the communication. So it wasn't just text. And you could do it as often you like. You could do it frame by frame. Well, I should say that we had to do a lot of work to do all of this. If you want to see the history of all the things I'm talking about, it's really quite easy. You can just go to markturner.org. There you see yourselves, and Red Hen, and there are pages and pages and pages. There are videos, there are articles, there are recordings, there's this and that and the other. And if you want to know about Red Hen, well, that's the lab that Francis and I put together, and how this stuff got going. Well, you just go to redhenlab.org and pages and pages and pages of stuff. Right, so we started developing a lot of little computational techniques for looking at data and amassing data. And we luckily much later became part of Google Summer of Code and have got a lot of help from people all over the world. You can go to markturner.org and click on the red hen, which is really a black hen, people point out, but that's just because semantics. And you can search for Google Summer of Code, and you'll see the years and years and years we've run Google Summer of Code and the kinds of tools that we have produced? Well, one of the things one needed to do, of course, is get more data, right? This is not what I want to do. That's a mistake. So just a second there. Let me come down to here. There we are. And if I say share screen, and what I want to share is desktop 1, share. So I don't think that I'm doing this right, but I'll try something a little different. Desktop 2, Google Chrome. Yeah. So point is that we needed to gather data. And so one of the things we did is set up a system. I spent a summer working with a little Raspberry Pi. It was kind of cute. I would go to the cafe, and while I was having my cortado, sit there with this little credit card computer and try to program it so that it in fact could do all the things that the big capture devices at UCLA did. And it took a little while, but we turned this into a system where for a couple of $100, you can set up a capture station and capture anything anywhere. So if it comes over the airwaves in a small island in the Pacific where there's no internet, you could still capture it. You could capture the radio, put it on a hard disk, and then we'd have data. You'd send it to us, and we would go through it. Now, we also created other ways of getting more data. For example, lots of people do behavioral experiments on gesture, for example, and they record them in the lab, but this kills me, can't share the data because of issues of confidentiality. So we created the Red Hen anonymizer, and the Red Hen anonymizer takes, here's the paper, and what it does is it takes it takes a video and maps onto it an artificially generated face, right? So, for example, here is an original face. That was a mistake. Yeah. So are you seeing? Yeah, you're seeing a face here, right? Right now. Yeah, you're seeing a face. This is a face, but you can take a computer-generated face which belongs to nobody, like one of these kinds of things. And using the Red Hen anonymizer, which is based on FSCAN, you can map a different face onto it. So this is a computer-generated face that maps onto that face. And so we set up something with the case IRB so that one can have subjects in the lab sign that the data can be shared if it's anonymized in this way. What this means is that we can share data from the lab with other researchers, and we can make open data sets. Now, I have to admit, it took me a year to get this through my IRB, but we created a page to guide researchers everywhere on how to anonymize. And here's an IRB that actually has a policy. You can look it up, and when you go to your IRB, your ethics board, you can say, look, this is the case protocol. This is how we do it. This is how we anonymize behavioral data. And so here is an original, and here is the mapped face, right? Is everybody seeing that? Just thumbs up, Cristobal? Good. So if you play the original, and in order to do that, I probably should let you see or hear the video. Share, share sound, and share. Excellent. So here's the original guy.
Well, first of all, important to understand, Lightning is used to make Bitcoin payments.
Now here is the de-identified guy with a computer face.
Well, first of all, important to understand, Lightning is used to make Bitcoin payments.
Now I chose a face, middle-aged white male, slightly dark eyebrows, that was very close to the original. But you can choose anything you like. You could choose Smokey the Bear. You could choose E.T. Anybody you like. So here's the same guy now wearing glasses.
And I exchange some keys so that we can set up.
So the point is, let's rise up to 30,000 feet. We want more and more and more data, ecologically valid data, instead of asking ourselves how people communicate. We want to create metadata for that data, which can be shared worldwide. We want to be able to make hypotheses about the data and predictions and find examples. So to give you an idea, remember I said I spent 6 months getting X's the Y of Z's when I was a graduate student. So when I was in Oslo, after we'd sort of set this up, but before we put natural language processing metadata generation in Red Hin Lab, it was 2012. And I was at my computer, my laptop, at home in our apartment, my wife and 3 kids. And I wrote a regular expression command for grepping through the data to pull out X, Y, Z's. This was hard to do. It was lines and lines of regular expressions, and it was kind of kludgy. And I hit go, and then I went away to help with dinner, but I came back in about a minute, and in a minute there were 10,000 hits. And I ran it again with a better command, and in about a minute there were 100,000 hits. It's completely blew away everything I had done in graduate school. And so this developed the idea of a way to get data, store data, make metadata, have everything be shared. When I was in graduate school, there was a server in Marin in the Bay Area called The Well. It was really great. You could connect to The Well. There was no internet. There was ARPANET, right? I could connect to The Well, and wow, it had stuff in it. I thought, well, we need a well for multimodal communication. So I thought I was going to call it The Well, but I was down in Brazil talking with Alan Chenke and Yves Sweetser and a bunch of Brazilians, Maíra Avelar and Flavia Maier, and we came up with the name Metadata Mothership. And one of the ideas is to make this stuff modular. So for example, and this is an IA tool, a couple of years ago, we developed the Red Hin audio tagger. Now what that does is take any video or audio and run it through any recognizer, any classifier for sound effects. There are a lot of these. We used Yamnet, but you could plug in a different one. And it will go through and it will pick out everything it can recognize. Like this is a turkey gobble, this is a train whistle, this is water running, whatever it is. Great, there's metadata and with timestamps, and it would work on all of the red hen kinds of stuff. And so you could put it back in red hen. The way red hen works is as follows. In my 54 years of doing this kind of stuff, I've seen an infinity of academic projects get turned over to a technical staff who, of course, want to do something nifty with it, so put it behind a database or something like that. Then the money runs out, the technical staff leaves, and the project becomes a brick. And nobody can use it, nobody can get into it, all that money frozen. So one of my principles for Red Hen was, sure, we can build databases, we can do sophisticated thing, but the entry level is always going to be flat files that you can actually look at. And for any asset, you'd have the same file name, but maybe different extensions. So MP4, MP3, whatever you were doing would be in files with the same file name, and they would all have timestamps on everything in them, so that if you wanted to know what was happening in that asset at a particular time, you could just source it all from all these different files. You could have them in different files. So you could have a file that had the sound effects. You know, SFX would be your extension. So you have this long file name .sfx, and there would be all the sound effects with timestamps. And so now you'd know where these sounds happened. And in fact, we arranged this so you could export it to CSV and put it in Elan. So now I am going to say a little something about Elan. Are you seeing Elan there? Pretty good. So I have paid my dues. I run Elan. I make annotation tiers. I'm writing a book about how people, with Chago Torrent, about how people imagine the future. And one of my examples is this video by Xi Jinping on the future of trade, Belt and Road. So I annotated this thing to death, really. You'll notice that it's in Chinese, and in my Elan file, which I'm happy to share with you, I have the Chinese, I have the translations, I have different translations. I have markings of visual events. I have blends, I have image schemas, I have. But one thing you can now do with this kind of thing is we ran the Red Hen audio tagger on it, and you'll notice there are all these annotation tiers for the turkey, and the water is flowing, and there's a musical, this and that and the other. It's really great stuff. Go look at the article on it. But the point is that now one can run any video or audio through automatically, get the sound effects, and import them automatically back into Red Hen or into Elan, if that's what you wanted to do. See, I had this experience of watching people use the wonderful Elan, the fabulous Elan from the Max Planck Institute in Nijmegen. But mostly what was happening is people had their own data and they made their own Elan files, and nobody got to see the data and nobody got to see the annotations. And maybe 3 years later, there would be a paper where the researcher would publish his or her conclusions. Well, for the first 15 seconds I understood about Elan, I wanted to blow it up because this is a way of not sharing data. Then I realized 15 seconds later, it's open source. So you can actually get into it. You can create new things. You could use it as a way to share EAF files on video that's in Red Hen. And this expands the metadata mothership. Okay, but now we have the real mothership coming in. It's multidata. there it is. You send it in, it's automated, you generate a bunch of metadata, you can share it, it's modular. By the way, of course, Red Hen is happy to be a partner of Multidata. Anything we do belongs to you. Anything we make can go right in there. Happy to help you make other kinds of things. Now, we did other kinds of, no, we're gonna not answer that. We did other kinds of things in Red Hen, natural language processing, tagging for grammar, sentiment detection, which isn't very good, frame detection, not very good. So then we started thinking about using artificial intelligence as a way to help automate tagging. And this project precedes the impressive introduction of ChatGPT, at which point suddenly the students who were interested in AI became exponentially larger, and my status rose sort of overnight. I'd been trying to convince people to look at these machine learning kinds of models since the 1980s, parallel distributed processing. Only the geeks wanted to know about it. But suddenly, even when I would show them GPT-2, only the geeks were interested. But then ChatGPT came along, and we wrote a book. We means Chago Torrent, Thomas Hoffman, Arturo Lorenzi, and me.
Artificial intelligence is an incredibly hot topic these days. In this element, we show how a conversational AI based on a large language model, an LLM, can assist the construction grammarian and the frame semanticist in particular.
Okay, so the idea here, by the way, if anybody needs an electronic copy of the book, I'll send it to you, is that people have been asking, do these things understand language? We don't ask that question. It's not really an interesting question. The answer is they don't. That's not the point. The point is they have been trained on vast amounts of data, more data than all the linguists who have ever lived could have looked at if they had 100 lives each. It's been trained on this data. We recognize patterns in multimodal communication. It has to recognize patterns if it's going to succeed, by which I mean produce output that we take as successful. It has to be able to do that. So my idea was, can you trick the LLM into revealing some of the patterns that it must have detected? And so we had a lot of experiments. One thing to do, of course, and by the way, there is a web page for this. We all want your input. What are the prompts you use? So we learned an awful lot about how to prompt the thing, what to do. The notion is that we could ask it to do things like look at FrameNet and then give us stories about frames. We could ask it to propose new frames. We could ask it to propose new lexical units for frames. And we did this. We did lots of things like this, and we've given a lot of presentations now, including at the inaugural conference of the Cognitive Linguistics Association of North America in Montreal. Thanks to Marcello Viridiano for producing all of these graphics and much of the insight. Some of the AI projects are, for example, the chatty AI for frames and constructions. So just last summer, we had a student and a team, and we, on Case Western Reserve University High Performance Computing Center, I'm very grateful to them and to the National Science Foundation for purchasing all these huge GPUs that we use. We trained Llama 3, fine-tuned it, and trained it using RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. So we gave it all of FrameNet 1.7. We gave it the encyclopedia, the FrameNet index, the frame relations, the blah, 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 blah. And we made a chatbot, and the chatbot can answer questions about frames. In other words, it can do some of the things that we talk about in the book. It's just a higher level. You can see this by going to markturner.org or redhinlab.org, going to Google Summer of Code, clicking on it, you'll see exactly this.
Hi everyone, my name is Rohan Kumar Singh and I am excited to be a contributor to Red Hen Lab as part of Google Summer of Code 2024. My project is called Chatty AI and is guided by my mentors, Professor Mark Turner, Arthur, and Marcelo. This project delves into the field.
So this is an attempt to do just as I say. Use AI to produce metadata that then can be shared with the world, and also for the tool to be shared with the world. All of these are open source. They're on the GitHub. You can go and get them. Another one, these things take months to produce, is Frame Blender. So I work on blending. And, you know, one of the problems with LLMs is they're not regarded as so creative because they're just trained on data. But I thought, well, can we get these things to blend? And in particular, can we take frames and get them to blend the frames? So we made Frame Blender. Frame Blender has all of FrameNet. It has lots of books on frames. It has some stuff on constructions. This is all inside Case HPC. And it will randomly go through. It will do whatever you tell it to do, but it can randomly go through and pick out any two frames and then try to blend them. So for instance, in the very first, you'll see this all in the video, the demo video.
Hi everyone, my name is Zhonghen Cheng, and I'm really thrilled to become a contributor to Red Hen Lab as part of Google Summer of Code 2024.
Okay, now what it does is takes these two frames, and in its first attempt, it picked up aging and travel. And it produced the phrase, through the years, grandma's wrinkles deepened and extended, each one a stamp on her passport to a new life. Now, I'm not cherry picking here, okay? You can see them all in the demo. You can generate them yourself. Notice that this is using AI and trying to push the AI to do something we didn't think it might otherwise be able to do. Now, it's not just text. A project that's trying it, much like MULTIDATA, and I hope MULTIDATA gets together with FrameNet Brazil. FrameNet Brazil has made a web tool because, of course, visual data can prompt for a frame just as easily as text. So this, you might think of this as a project that is pushing the envelope. We've all wanted to be able to tag for gesture, for example. Remember Cristobal in 2008 talking about what we need to do is not just look for text and then see what gestures accompany it, co-speech gesture. We need to be able to look for gestures and see what speech accompanies that gesture, right? But the technology has to push forward. This is an attempt to do that kind of thing. You can find this at FrameNet Brazil. There are lots of videos about it, all hail.
Hello and welcome to the first tutorial of the FrameNet Brazil Web Annotation tool. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you the basic menus of the tool, and then in the following tutorial, documents, their types, genres, so on and so forth. You can access your profile, change your password, or log out. Constructions and therefore the corpus annotation.
So there are a lot of tools there, and there's this thing called LUTMA that FrameNet Brazil made, Red Hen participated, to help people propose new frames. Okay, now this can all seem a little bit daunting, because I talk about case HPC and 48 gigabyte GPUs. But I have a last slide here. I made this yesterday. All right. Now this kind of possibility is coming to the consumer. That is, you don't have to be Peter Uhrig or Cristobal Pagan-Canovas or Chago Torrent to be able to do this. You could do this right now from your laptop. So there are many of these kinds of things. Don't get sucked into the details. What they are is essentially a foundation model, a large language model in the cloud. And the user, through a web interface, can provide sources. That's retrieval augmented generation. And you can say, use these sources. And in fact, you can say, if you don't find it in the source, say, I don't know. So by the way, there was a lot of problem with AI at the beginning because it was a dog and pony show, ChatGPT. People got upset about hallucination and all kinds of other things. But you know, that's so last century. Things have changed. If you're confused about this or that or the other, well, you can just modify it, right? So this is called Notebook LM, but there are many of these things. There are now, I mean, very, very recently, OpenAI has Canvas, Microsoft has Azure OpenAI, Meta has its Llama series and its RAG systems, Anthropic, Claude has such a system, and of course the old ones are LangChain and conceptual AI and things like that. Okay, so Mark, let's get to the actual story here. Yeah. Yeah, there we go. So you are seeing, I hope, something that says Notebook LM in the upper left. Good. Okay, now here's what I did, and I did this yesterday. It took 1 hour, and you could just take it from me. Remember, there are lots of systems like this now available to you. First thing I did is take all of the frames in FrameNet 1.7. This is the last slide. They're all in XML. Now, Google Docs can't handle XML. That's not really a visual presentation. It's a database kind of format. But using a little bit of Python, you can turn any XML file into a text file, .txt. So all of the characters are still there. It's just that now Google Docs is willing to upload it and to read it as a Google Doc, right? Problem was, it was too big, and it's huge. It's actually very small, FrameNet. We really need to extend FrameNet, but it's huge. So I broke it into frames A to C, frames D to F, frames G to K, frames L to N, and frames O to Z. I also gave it the URLs of websites, 2 websites for FrameNet and on Drupal, and I also gave it the frame index, and I gave it the book that usually comes with FrameNet. It's called FrameNet 2. These are my sources, right? So now you can say things like this. I literally put this together in an hour, not inside Case HPC. This would be available to you. You can say, hi, this is not canned. We're doing this live. The revenge frame, drawing on the source, which one do I want here? I'll say frames O to Z. Give a full description with analysis and 5 examples of sentences that prompt for the revenge frame in English and 5 more in Spanish. Now, I don't know what's going to happen. All right? That's the beauty of this. I need you all to jump off a cliff when we say go. And it's got all these sources that it has to go look through. And that's megabytes and megabytes of stuff. The revenge frame let's go and look at everything it's saying here. Notice this was all just generated while you were watching. The revenge frame is detailed in the source frames O to Z, centers on the concept of retribution for a perceived wrong, emphasizing actions outside. Avenger inflicts punishment on offender, injured party, core elements of relationships at the heart, prior offense, blah, blah. The source, blah, blah. Here are some. They took revenge for the deaths of 2 loyalist prisoners. This example clearly demonstrates the core elements of the frames. They as the avenger, blah, blah. Joe had the affair as a kind of revenge against Pat. So here are the English examples, and here are the Spanish examples. I leave it to Murcia to decide whether these are any good. Impulsada por una sed de venganza, ella tramó su elaborado plan. Right? Okay. Now, because I know Cristobal, who of course knows Greek, I thought, well, let's try a little something here. Let me go and get, what can I get? Let's get, revenge makes me think of the Iliad, right? Sing to me, O Muse. And if I can find a little, by the way, remember I talked about my Xi Jinping on Belt and Road. I'm going to run it through Multidata, but I'm also going to make a notebook like this for analyzing that. And one of the things that I want to have it do is annotate for frames in Chinese. So let's go and look at one last little example. I'm going to share, we'll come back here. All right, you're seeing Notebook LM again. And I'm going to say, analyze the frames that are evoked by the opening of the Iliad in classical Greek, and I paste in some Greek, right? Let's see what it does. Now, when I say I can put in Chinese, I can, and it does okay. The problem with this, of course, is that FrameNet is mostly for English. We're really trying to expand it. FrameNet Brazil and Global FrameNet are doing a lot of work on that. But of course, we're using a tool that's meant for English on classical Greek, right? So everybody's head is going to explode. Revenge.
Mark, just interrupting here a second, because now it's really dangerous. It's Mark, me, and the Iliad. So if you don't want us to go on forever, prepare your questions.
We're just going to show you this, and then we're going to stop. Thank you for your help.
Exactly.
The first word, Menin, wrath, sing goddess, the wrath, the lines, blah, 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 blah. And that's where I thought I would end. And so I will stop the share. Now, the point is that we're now in a completely different world where we hope we can have a global enterprise, no more Elan files with data in somebody's desk drawer that we don't get to share. We share the data, we share the metadata, everybody helps everybody. And I feel that I'm talking to the future because you are the people who have put these enterprises forward. And all of this is by way of acknowledging your work. And since this is the inaugural lecture, congratulating the universities and the principal investigators behind MULTIDATA and the MULTIDATA pipeline. My heart leaps up when I behold. Thank you very much. That's it.